Ethan Cole's hands went numb the second she walked through the restaurant door. Same dark hair falling past her shoulders. Same slight tilt of her head when she smiled. Same amber eyes that used to watch him shave in the morning. He'd buried that face 3 years ago in a cemetery across town, held his daughter's hand while they lowered the casket, felt the rain mix with his tears as dirt hit polished wood. But now she was here, alive, breathing, walking toward his table with an uncertain smile, and Ethan's mind shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces of impossible. He ran, left his coat, left his dignity, left everything but the terror that grief had finally, irreversibly broken him. But before we dive into what happened next, into the truth that would reshape everything Ethan thought he knew about love, loss, and the fragile architecture of a broken heart, I want to invite you to stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey reaches. Because what you're about to hear isn't just about a man who saw a ghost. It's about what happens when the past refuses to stay buried, when a child's innocent question becomes the key to healing, and when love proves itself bigger than grief, stronger than fear, and braver than we ever imagined possible. This is the story of Ethan Cole. And it begins with him running. The autumn air hit Ethan's face like a slap as he burst through the restaurant's glass doors, his breath coming in ragged gasps that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with panic. Behind him, through the warm glow of Marchetti's Italian bistro, he could still see her, the woman who wore his dead wife's face, standing near the hostess stand, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. He didn't stop running until he reached his car 3 blocks away, parked under a streetlight that flickered with dying bulbs. His hands shook so violently, it took 4 attempts to get the key in the lock. When he finally collapsed into the driver's seat, Ethan gripped the steering wheel and forced himself to breathe. In, out, in, out. The breathing technique his therapist had taught him 2 years ago when the panic attacks first started, when 6-year-old Sophie would wake screaming from nightmares, and Ethan would realize he had no idea how to be both mother and father to a child who kept asking when mommy was coming home from heaven. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Of course it was Marcus, his best friend since college, the man who'd convinced him this blind date was a good idea, who'd insisted that 3 years was long enough to grieve, that Sophie needed to see her father living again, not just surviving. Ethan ignored the call. Then the second one. By the third, he answered. What the hell happened? Marcus's voice carried equal parts concern and confusion. Clara just texted my wife. She said you looked at her like she was a ghost and bolted. Man, I know you're rusty at dating, but she looks exactly like Emma. Ethan's voice came out flat, hollow. Exactly. Same face, same hair, same everything. Silence stretched across the line. Then, that's not possible. I've seen Clara's photos. She's pretty, sure, but I'm not talking about similar, Marcus. I'm talking about identical, like someone went into my memories and pulled Emma out and put her in that restaurant. Ethan closed his eyes, but the image was burned there. That smile, those eyes, the way she tucked her hair behind her left ear, a gesture so achingly familiar it had stopped his heart. I think I'm losing my mind. You're not losing your mind. Marcus's tone shifted, becoming the same steady anchor it had been during the funeral, during the first terrible year, during every moment when Ethan thought he couldn't take another step forward. Listen to me. Go home. Be with Sophie. We'll figure this out tomorrow. Maybe it's just, I don't know, stress, or your brain playing tricks because you're anxious about dating again. But Ethan barely heard him, because even as Marcus spoke, his mind was replaying every second of those 30 seconds in the restaurant. The way Clara had moved through the door, graceful and unhurried. The way her dress, deep green, Emma's favorite color, had swirled around her knees. The way she'd scanned the room, her gaze landing on him with recognition from Marcus's description, her smile brightening, one hand rising in a small wave. And then their eyes had met. Ethan had watched her smile falter, had seen something flash across her face. Not confusion exactly, but something deeper, older. Recognition? Impossible. Emma had been gone for 3 years. Emma was dead. Ethan had identified her body after the accident, had planned her funeral, had explained to their 4-year-old daughter why Mommy's body was there, but Mommy wasn't in it anymore. "Ethan, you still there?" "I have to go," Ethan said, and ended the call. The drive home took 15 minutes through quiet suburban streets, lined with houses where normal families did normal things, watched television, argued about homework, planned weekend trips to the park. Ethan pulled into his driveway and sat in the darkness, staring at his house. Warm light glowed from Sophie's bedroom window. Mrs. Chen, his neighbor and regular babysitter, would have her tucked in by now, probably reading the same story they read every night, the one about the brave little girl who sailed to the moon. Emma had bought that book a week before she died. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. He forced himself to catalog the facts, the way Emma used to do when facing a problem at the hospital where she'd worked as a pediatric nurse. "Strip away emotion," she'd say. "Look at what's real." Fact: his wife had died 3 years ago in a car accident. Fact: he'd seen her body, touched her cold hand, said goodbye. Fact: the woman in that restaurant couldn't possibly be Emma, but she looked exactly like her. The front door opened and Mrs. Chen appeared, silhouetted against the warm interior light. Ethan grabbed his phone and wallet and forced himself out of the car. "You're home early," Mrs. Chen observed as he approached. Her kind eyes, magnified behind thick glasses, studied his face. "The date didn't go well?" "You could say that." Ethan managed a weak smile. "Sophie okay?" "Sound asleep. We made cookies, played dress-up, read 3 stories instead of 1. Mrs. Chen gathered her purse and sweater from the hall table. "She asked about her mother tonight, wanted to know if I knew Emma. I told her I didn't have that privilege, but that I could tell Emma was wonderful because she made you and Sophie." Ethan's throat tightened. "Thank you for that." "She's processing things, that sweet girl. Questions are healthy." Mrs. Chen patted his arm. "You doing okay? You look pale. Just tired. Long day at work, then the date." He shrugged, unwilling to explain the unexplainable. After Mrs. Chen left, Ethan moved through the house on autopilot, checking locks, turning off lights, pausing at Sophie's bedroom door to watch her sleep. She was sprawled across her twin bed, blankets kicked off, her stuffed elephant clutched against her chest. In sleep, she looked so much like Emma, it hurt. The same delicate features, the same dark lashes fanned against rounded cheeks. Ethan pulled the blanket over her and kissed her forehead. "Love you, Soph," he whispered. In his own bedroom, Ethan didn't bother turning on the light. He sat on the edge of the bed Emma had helped him pick out 7 years ago, when they'd bought this house, and argued cheerfully about whether a king or queen mattress made more sense. Emma had won, as she usually did, with logic and kisses in equal measure. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Sarah talked to Clara. She's worried she upset you somehow, wants to know if you're okay." Then another. "Clara asked if you lost someone recently. Said you looked at her like you'd seen a ghost." Ethan stared at the messages. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then fell away. What could he possibly say? How could he explain that Clara Hayes wasn't just similar to his dead wife, but identical to her? Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, Ethan dreamed of the accident. The police officer at his door, hat in hands, face grave. The hospital corridor, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The morgue attendant pulling back the sheet. Emma's face, peaceful in death, a bruise darkening her temple. He woke at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat. By 3:30, he was at his computer, the blue glow illuminating his face in the dark study. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Clara Hayes. Facebook profiles loaded, too many to count. He added details Marcus had mentioned. Clara Hayes, teacher, Seattle. The results narrowed, and there she was, in the 3rd profile down. Profile picture. A woman in hiking gear, standing atop a mountain, arms spread wide, face tilted toward the sun. Emma's face. Ethan clicked through to her page. Public posts scrolled past his eyes. Photos of classroom activities. She taught 2nd grade. Pictures of coffee cups and sunsets and books. A selfie with friends at a brewery. A video of her painting in a small studio apartment. Everything normal, everything ordinary, except for the face. He scrolled back further, through years of posts. Birthdays, holidays, random musings about teaching and life in Seattle. And then, buried 2 years back, a post that made Ethan's blood run cold. Still searching. If anyone has information about adoption records from Sacred Heart Hospital, Portland, Oregon, 1988 to 1989, please DM me. Looking for my biological family. Adoption, family search. Ethan read it 3 times. Emma had been born in Portland. Emma had been born in 1988. His hands were shaking again as he clicked on Clara's About section. Born, December 15th, 1988. Hometown, Seattle, Washington. Previously, Portland, Oregon. Emma's birthday, December 15th, 1988. No, Ethan whispered to the empty room. No, that's impossible. But even as he said it, fragments of memory surfaced. Emma talking about her childhood, about being raised by her grandmother after her parents died. Emma's grandmother passing away when Sophie was 2, taking with her all the old stories, the family history. Emma had always said she felt like part of her history was missing, like there were questions her grandmother had never quite answered, had never wanted to answer. Ethan's mind raced. If Clara was adopted, if Emma's grandmother had raised only one child, if there had been 2 babies, twins, he breathed. The word hung in the air, impossible and perfect and terrible all at once. It would explain everything, the identical appearance, the same birthday, the Portland connection. But it also meant something that made Ethan's chest constrict with a grief so sharp it felt new. Emma had died never knowing she had a sister, had gone her whole life with a twin somewhere in the world, searching for family, and they'd never found each other. Dawn was breaking when Ethan finally closed his computer. He sat in the growing light, watching dust motes dance in the air, thinking about impossible coincidences, and separated twins and the woman who'd walked into Marchetti's wearing his dead wife's face. And he thought about Sophie, asleep down the hall, who'd asked Mrs. Chen about her mother. Sophie, who deserved to know the truth about her family. Sophie, who'd lost her mother and might have just gained an aunt she never knew existed. If he was right. If this insane theory held even a shred of truth. His phone buzzed. Marcus again. Coffee this morning? We need to talk about last night. Ethan typed back. Need to ask you something first. Everything you know about Clara Hayes. Everything. The response came immediately. Call me, now. Marcus answered on the first ring. I've been up all night, he said without preamble. After you hung up, after Sarah talked to Clara, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, that she looked exactly like Emma. Tell me about her background. Ethan kept his voice steady, clinical. Where she's from, her family. Sarah met her at a teacher conference 6 months ago. They stayed in touch, became friends. Clara moved to the city last summer for a teaching position. Marcus paused. She's adopted. Grew up in Seattle with parents who passed away a few years ago. She's been searching for her biological family for a while now. Ethan closed his eyes. When's her birthday? Why does that matter? Marcus. When is Clara Hayes' birthday? A rustling sound, probably Marcus checking his phone. Then, December 15th, same as... His voice dropped. Oh my God. Same as Emma's. She was born in Portland. It wasn't a question. Yeah. How did you... Marcus inhaled sharply. Ethan, what are you thinking? I'm thinking, Ethan said slowly, that Emma had a twin sister. I'm thinking they were separated at birth, maybe through adoption, and neither of them knew the other existed. I'm thinking the woman I saw last night wasn't a ghost or a hallucination or my mind breaking down. She was Emma's sister. Clara is Emma's sister. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. If that's true, Marcus finally said, then Clara has been searching for a family that includes her dead twin sister, and she has no idea. And Sophie has an aunt she's never met. Jesus. Marcus let out a long breath. What are you going to do? Ethan looked toward the hallway, where Sophie's bedroom door stood slightly ajar. I need to be sure first. I need proof before I say anything to anyone, especially to Sophie. And if you're right, then I have to tell Clara that her sister is dead. The words felt like shards of glass in Ethan's throat. I have to tell her she'll never get the reunion she's been searching for, that she found her biological family 3 years too late. That's... Marcus trailed off. I can't imagine having to do that. But she deserves to know. Ethan stood, began pacing the small study. She deserves to know Emma existed, that she had a family, that she has a niece. His voice cracked. That someone loved her sister, even if her sister never knew she had one. Morning light streamed through the window, painting everything in shades of gold. Somewhere in the house, Ethan heard Sophie's bedroom door open, her small feet padding toward the bathroom. Soon she'd be up, wanting breakfast, chattering about her dreams and her plans for the day. Life continuing, the way it always did, even when the world tilted sideways. I need to see her again, Ethan said. I need to talk to Clara. But I need to do this right. I need to be certain before I turn her whole world upside down. Sarah can arrange it, Marcus offered. Maybe lunch? Somewhere neutral? Public? No. Ethan shook his head even though Marcus couldn't see him. I ran out on her last night. I probably scared her half to death. I need to explain first, apologize. He ran a hand through his hair. I need to figure out how to tell a stranger that she looks exactly like my dead wife, because she might be my dead wife's twin sister. That's a hell of a conversation starter. Despite everything, Ethan almost laughed. Yeah, it is. Sophie appeared in the doorway of the study, elephant tucked under one arm, her hair a wild tangle around her sleep-soft face. Daddy? Who are you talking to? Ethan covered the phone. Uncle Marcus, go brush your teeth, sweetheart. I'll make pancakes. Her eyes lit up. With chocolate chips? With chocolate chips. She scampered off, and Ethan heard the bathroom faucet turn on. He uncovered the phone. I have to go. But, Marcus? Thank you. For setting up the date, even though I ran out. For believing me, for not thinking I've lost my mind. Hey, we've been friends for 15 years. I know when you're serious. Marcus's voice softened. And for what it's worth, if you're right about this, if Clara really is Emma's twin, then something impossible just happened, in the worst way and the best way at the same time. After they hung up, Ethan stood in the study for a long moment, looking at the framed photograph on his desk. His wedding day, Emma radiant in white, him unable to stop smiling, both of them so young and certain that love was enough to weather anything. They'd been wrong. Love wasn't enough to survive a drunk driver running a red light on a Tuesday afternoon. Wasn't enough to prevent Sophie from growing up without her mother. Wasn't enough to fill the hole Emma's absence had carved into their lives. But maybe, impossibly, love was enough to bring Clara Hayes to the city at exactly this moment, to connect her with Marcus and Sarah, to put her in that restaurant last night. Maybe love was enough to give Sophie the family connection she deserved, even if it came in a form none of them expected. Daddy, Sophie called from the kitchen. I'm hungry. Coming, baby girl. Ethan took one last look at Emma's photograph, then headed toward the kitchen, toward his daughter, toward the normal Saturday morning routine of pancakes and cartoons and the ordinary magic of raising a child alone. But in the back of his mind, he was already composing the message he'd send to Clara Hayes, already trying to find words for the impossible, already preparing to tell a stranger that she'd been searching for a sister who'd been dead for 3 years, and in the process of that search, she'd found something else entirely. A family that didn't know she existed, a niece who needed her, and a broken-hearted widower trying to figure out if seeing his dead wife's face across a restaurant table was the worst thing that could happen, or somehow, impossibly, a gift he didn't know he needed. The pancakes burned slightly while Ethan stood at the stove, lost in thought. Sophie didn't mind. She ate them covered in syrup and chocolate chips, swinging her legs from her chair, telling Ethan about the dream she'd had where she could fly. And I flew all the way to the moon, she said, syrup on her chin, eyes bright with the story. And Mommy was there, Daddy. She said she was proud of me. Ethan's throat tightened. He reached across the table to wipe her chin with a napkin. That sounds like a beautiful dream, Soph. Do you think Mommy can really see me from heaven? The question, so innocent, so loaded, hit Ethan square in the chest. He thought about Clara Hayes walking around the city right now, maybe teaching her second-grade class on Monday, completely unaware that her twin sister had died 3 years ago. completely unaware that she had a niece who still dreamed about her mother. "I think," Ethan said carefully, choosing his words like stepping stones across a river, "that love doesn't end just because someone isn't here anymore. I think Mommy's love is still with you, still proud of you every single day." Sophie seemed to consider this, her small face serious. Then she smiled, gap-toothed and perfect. That's what Mrs. Chen said too. After breakfast, while Sophie played in her room, Ethan returned to his computer. He opened a blank email to Clara Hayes, then stared at the cursor blinking on the white screen. "Dear Clara, you don't know me, but I'm the man who ran out of the restaurant last night. My name is Ethan Cole, and I owe you an explanation and an apology." He deleted it, started again. "Clara, first, I'm sorry for last night. I'm sure I scared you, and that wasn't fair. I'd like to explain what happened, if you're willing to meet me for coffee." Delete. Too casual for what he needed to say. He tried a third time, a fourth, each attempt feeling inadequate for the magnitude of what he was about to unleash into her life. Finally, he settled on simplicity. "Dear Clara Hayes, my name is Ethan Cole. We were supposed to meet for dinner last night through Marcus and Sarah. I owe you both an apology and an explanation for my behavior. I know this will sound strange, but I need to ask you some questions about your background, specifically about your biological family and your adoption. I believe I may have information that's relevant to your search. If you're willing to meet, I'd like to speak with you as soon as possible. This is important, not just for you, but for my daughter as well. I understand if you're not comfortable meeting after the way I acted last night, but I hope you'll give me a chance to explain. Sincerely, Ethan Cole." His finger hovered over the send button. Once he pressed it, there was no taking it back. Once this email flew across the digital void into Clara Hayes' inbox, he'd set in motion a chain of events that would change multiple lives forever. Sophie's laugh drifted from her bedroom, bright and uncomplicated. The sound of a child who still believed the world was basically good, basically safe, basically fair. Ethan hit send. The rest of the weekend passed in a strange state of suspension. Ethan checked his email obsessively while trying to maintain normalcy for Sophie. They went to the park. They made cookies. They had a movie night on the couch. Sophie nestled against his side, commenting on every plot development in her 6-year-old way. Clara's response came Sunday evening, while Ethan was reading Sophie her bedtime story. "Mr. Cole, your email has left me with more questions than answers, but yes, I'm willing to meet. I've been searching for information about my biological family for 3 years. If you have something that could help, I want to know. I'm free Tuesday after school. There's a coffee shop near my apartment, Riverside Grounds on Madison Street. Does 4 p.m. work for you? And for what it's worth, I forgive you for Friday night. Sarah told me you lost your wife a few years ago. I can't imagine how hard dating again must be. Clara Hayes." Ethan stared at the message. She had no idea how close to the truth she was. No idea that his dead wife and her lost biological family were the same person. No idea that in 2 days her entire understanding of her own history was about to shatter and reform into something new. He typed back, "Tuesday at 4 works. Thank you for giving me this chance. What I have to tell you, it's complicated, but I promise it's important." Sophie stirred against him, pulling him back to the present. "Daddy, you stopped reading." "Sorry, baby girl." Ethan set his phone aside and returned to the story, to the brave little girl sailing to the moon, to the comforting rhythm of words Emma had read 100 times before him. But his mind was already 2 days ahead, in a coffee shop on Madison Street, sitting across from a woman who wore his dead wife's face, about to tell her that impossible things were real, that she had a sister she'd never meet, and that somewhere in this broken, beautiful world, love found a way to connect people even after death. Monday and Tuesday crawled by. Ethan took Sophie to school, went through the motions at his job as a civil engineer, picked Sophie up, made dinner, supervised homework, tucked her into bed. All while his phone sat heavy in his pocket, a constant reminder of the meeting that loomed ahead. Tuesday afternoon, he left work early, claiming a doctor's appointment. He sat in his car outside Riverside Grounds for 10 minutes, gathering courage, rehearsing words that felt wholly inadequate. At precisely 4 p.m., he walked through the door. Clara Hayes was already there, seated at a corner table, hands wrapped around a coffee cup. When she looked up and saw him, Ethan watched her face do something complicated. Recognition, uncertainty, a flicker of the same startled emotion he'd seen Friday night. Up close, in daylight, the resemblance to Emma was even more staggering. Every detail matched: the arch of her eyebrows, the curve of her jaw, the way her hair fell across her shoulders. But there were differences too, small things Ethan cataloged with desperate attention. Clara's style was different, more casual than Emma's had been. Her voice when she spoke carried a different cadence. "Mr. Cole?" She gestured to the chair across from her. "Ethan, please." He sat, suddenly unsure where to begin. "Thank you for meeting me." "You said you had information about my biological family." Clara's gaze was direct, searching. "I've hit dead ends everywhere I've looked. If you know something—" "I do." Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket, opened the photo gallery, and found what he needed. A picture from his wedding day. Emma in her dress, laughing, eyes bright with joy. He turned the phone toward Clara. "Do you recognize this woman?" The color drained from Clara's face. Her hand flew to her mouth. The coffee cup rattled against its saucer as she set it down with shaking fingers. "That's—" Her voice came out strangled. "That's me. But I don't have a wedding photo. I've never been married. How do you have a picture of me in a wedding dress?" "That's not you," Ethan said gently. "That's my wife, Emma Cole. She died 3 years ago in a car accident." Clara's eyes snapped up to meet his, wide with confusion and dawning horror. "But that's impossible. That woman looks exactly like you." Ethan nodded. "I know. That's why I ran out of the restaurant Friday night. When I saw you, I thought I was hallucinating. Thought grief had finally broken my mind." He paused, gathering himself. "But then I started looking into your background, your adoption, your birthday." "December 15th, 1988, Clara whispered. "Same as Emma's. And you were both born in Portland, Oregon, and you've been searching for your biological family for years." Ethan leaned forward. "Clara, I'm almost certain that Emma was your twin sister. That you were separated at birth, probably through adoption, and neither of you knew the other existed." The words hung between them, heavy and irrevocable. Clara sat frozen, her face cycling through expressions too fast to name: shock, denial, grief, hope, despair. "No," she finally said. "That's not— How could that be possible? How could I have had a sister and never known? How could she have died and I didn't even feel it?" Her voice broke on the last word, and tears spilled down her cheeks. She swiped at them angrily, but they kept coming. Ethan felt his own eyes burning. "I don't know. I've been asking myself the same question since Friday night. All I know is that you were looking for family, and you found them, just 3 years too late to meet the sister you didn't know you had." "Tell me about her." Clara's hands gripped the edge of the table. "Please, tell me everything." And so Ethan did. He talked about meeting Emma in college, about her work as a pediatric nurse, about her laugh and her fierce loyalty, and the way she made every room brighter just by being in it. He talked about their wedding, their daughter, the life they'd built together. He talked about the accident, the funeral, the impossible grief of explaining death to a 4-year-old. And he talked about Sophie, who looked so much like her mother it hurt, who asked questions about heaven, who deserved to know she had an aunt. Clara listened to it all, tears streaming silently down her face, one hand pressed to her chest as if trying to hold her heart together. When Ethan finished, the coffee shop had grown dim with late afternoon shadows. Other patrons had come and gone around them, oblivious to the world being reconstructed at their corner table. "I have a niece," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emma had a daughter, and that means I have a niece. Her name is Sophie. She's 6 years old. She's smart and funny and kind, and she looks exactly like Emma, exactly like you." Clara closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had shifted in her expression. "Can I meet her?" The question Ethan had been both dreading and hoping for. "Yes, but I need to prepare her first. I need to figure out how to explain this in a way a 6-year-old can understand." "Of course." Clara nodded quickly. "Of course, take whatever time you need. I've waited this long to find my family. I can wait a little longer." She paused. "But Ethan, Thank you for reaching out, for telling me, for giving me this, even though it comes with so much grief. They exchanged phone numbers, made tentative plans to meet again, this time with Sophie, and as Ethan left the coffee shop and headed toward his car, he felt something shift in his chest. Not healing exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. The first small crack in the wall of grief he'd built around his heart, letting in a sliver of light he hadn't known he needed. The drive home from Riverside Grounds felt like navigating through fog. Ethan's hands moved on autopilot, turn signal, brake, accelerator, while his mind replayed every moment of the conversation with Clara. The way her face had crumpled when he'd shown her Emma's photo. The raw grief in her voice when she'd asked how she could have had a sister and never felt her absence. The desperate hope when she'd asked about Sophie. He pulled into Mrs. Chen's driveway just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Emma would have stopped to photograph. Mrs. Chen met him at the door with Sophie already bundled in her jacket, backpack on her shoulders. "She was an angel today," Mrs. Chen reported, smoothing Sophie's hair. "We made paper snowflakes and read about penguins." "Penguins live in Antarctica," Sophie announced, grabbing Ethan's hand. "And they can't fly, but they're still birds. And they huddle together to stay warm, and the daddies take care of the eggs while the mommies hunt for food." Ethan managed to smile. "Sounds like you learned a lot." In the car, Sophie chattered about her day, the penguin facts, what she'd had for snack, how her friend Lily had fallen on the playground but was okay. Normal 6-year-old concerns, a world away from the conversation Ethan had just had about twin sisters and impossible coincidences and grief that spanned generations. "Daddy?" Sophie's voice cut through his thoughts. "You're being quiet." "Just thinking, sweetheart." "About what?" Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was watching him with those sharp, observant eyes that missed nothing. Emma's eyes. Clara's eyes. "About family," he said carefully. "About how sometimes we have family we don't know about." Sophie considered this. "Like how Lily has cousins in California she's never met?" "Yeah, kind of like that." They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, Sophie humming to herself while Ethan's mind churned. How did you tell a 6-year-old that her mother had a twin sister? How did you explain that someone who looked exactly like Mommy was real, alive, wanting to meet her? At home, Ethan made Sophie's favorite dinner, mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs, baby carrots on the side. She ate while telling him more penguin facts, and he listened while trying to formulate words that wouldn't confuse or frighten her. After dinner, after bath time, after Sophie was in her pajamas with her teeth brushed and her elephant clutched against her chest, Ethan sat on the edge of her bed and took a deep breath. "Soph, I need to talk to you about something important." Her expression grew serious. "Am I in trouble?" "No, baby girl, not at all." He took her small hand in his. "Remember how you asked Mrs. Chen about Mommy, about whether I knew her?" Sophie nodded. "She said Mommy must have been wonderful because she made you and me." "She was right. Mommy was wonderful. But there's something about Mommy I just found out, something I didn't know before." Ethan paused, searching for the right words. "You know how some kids have brothers or sisters? Like Lily has a baby brother." "Exactly. Well, sometimes people have siblings they don't know about. Maybe they lived in different places, or they were adopted by different families when they were babies." Sophie's brow furrowed. "Did Mommy have a brother or sister she didn't know about?" "A sister, a twin sister, which means they were born at the same time on the same day. They looked exactly the same." "Like identical." Sophie's eyes widened. "I learned about identical twins in school. They're from the same egg." Ethan had to smile despite the heaviness in his chest. "That's right, and Mommy's twin sister is alive. Her name is Clara, and she's been looking for her family for a long time. She didn't know she had a sister until I told her." Sophie sat up straighter, processing this information with the seriousness she brought to important matters. "So Clara is Mommy's sister?" "Yes." "And that means she's my aunt?" "Yes." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Does she look like Mommy?" Ethan's throat tightened. "She looks exactly like Mommy, because they're identical twins." "Can I meet her?" The question came so simply, so hopefully, that Ethan had to blink back tears. "Would you want to?" Of course. Sophie's face lit up. She's family, and maybe... She paused, her expression becoming uncertain. Maybe she can tell me things about Mommy I don't know, since they're twins? Ethan's heart broke and mended simultaneously. Clara didn't know Mommy's sweetheart. They were separated when they were babies, but she would really like to meet you. She wants to know about Mommy and about you. Sophie thought about this, her small face scrunched in concentration. Is she nice? I think so. I just met her today, but she seems very nice. She's a teacher, like Miss Rodriguez. Okay. Sophie settled back against her pillows. I want to meet her. When can we? Soon. I need to plan it with her first. Make sure everyone's ready. Ethan tucked the blanket around her. How do you feel about all this, Soph? It's okay if you're confused or worried or anything. Sophie was quiet, her fingers playing with her elephant's ear. I'm a little scared, she finally admitted. What if she doesn't like me? Oh, sweetheart. Ethan gathered her into his arms. Clara already wants to meet you. Already wants to know you. You're her niece, her only connection to the sister she lost. She's going to love you. Promise? I promise. After Sophie fell asleep, Ethan sat in the living room with his phone, staring at Clara's contact information. Finally, he typed, I told Sophie tonight. She wants to meet you. The response came within minutes. Really? How did she react? Better than I expected. She's 6, so she takes things at face value. She's a little nervous you won't like her. Tell her I already love her. Because she's Emma's daughter, because she's family. Ethan stared at that message for a long time. Then, how are you doing? Today was a lot. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before Clara's response came through. I keep looking at the photo you showed me, of Emma, of my sister. I downloaded it from the coffee shop's Wi-Fi before I left. I hope that's okay. I've been staring at her face, trying to find myself in it, trying to imagine what it would have been like to grow up knowing her, to have a sister. I'm sorry you didn't get that chance. Me too. But Ethan, thank you for finding me, for telling me. I know it can't have been easy, seeing me and thinking you were seeing Emma's ghost. It wasn't, but now, I don't know. Maybe this is supposed to mean something. Maybe Emma would want Sophie to know her aunt. I'd like to think so. They texted back and forth for another hour, making plans. Clara suggested Saturday afternoon at the park, neutral ground, outdoor space where Sophie could feel comfortable. Ethan agreed. They decided to keep it casual, low pressure, just an hour or two to let Sophie and Clara meet without overwhelming either of them. The next 3 days passed in a strange state of anticipation. Ethan found himself watching Sophie more carefully, noticing all the ways she resembled Emma, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the way she laughed with her whole body, the way she approached the world with curiosity and kindness. Clara would see all of it, would recognize her sister in these small gestures and expressions, would understand, in a way no one else could, the weight of Emma's absence. Wednesday night, Marcus called. Sarah told me you met with Clara. How did it go? Better and worse than I expected. Ethan settled into his desk chair, keeping his voice low so Sophie wouldn't hear from her bedroom. She took it hard, finding out she had a sister, that she died all at once. But she wants to meet Sophie. And Sophie? Sophie's more adaptable than I am. She processed it, asked if Clara was nice, and moved on. Ethan rubbed his eyes. Kids are amazing that way. They are. Marcus paused. How are you holding up? This can't be easy. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me feels like I'm betraying Emma somehow, bringing her twin sister into our lives. But another part knows Emma would want this. Would want Sophie to have family beyond just me. Emma would definitely want that, Marcus agreed. She was all about family. Remember how she adopted every stray friend we had in college? Ethan smiled despite himself. She made Thanksgiving dinner for 12 people in that tiny apartment kitchen our senior year. And the turkey was raw in the middle, but nobody cared because she made everyone feel like they belonged. Marcus's voice softened. That's what she'd want for Sophie, for Clara too, a sense of belonging. After they hung up, Ethan pulled out the photo album he kept in his desk drawer, pictures from their life together, college parties, their wedding, Sophie's birth, family vacations. He studied Emma's face in each image, looking for the things he'd noticed in Clara. The similarities were undeniable, but so were the differences. Emma had worn her hair shorter after Sophie was born, had developed a small scar on her chin from a childhood bicycle accident, had carried herself with a confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and what she wanted. Clara was still searching for those things, still trying to piece together her identity from fragments and gaps. Friday evening, Ethan took Sophie shopping for a new outfit. She picked a purple dress with pockets that she modeled for him in the department store, spinning so it flared around her legs. "Clara's going to think I'm pretty, right, Daddy?" "Clara's going to think you're beautiful, inside and out." "What if she doesn't want to be my aunt? What if she meets me and decides family is too hard?" Ethan knelt down to Sophie's level, cupping her face in his hands. "Listen to me, Sophie Marie Cole. You are amazing. You are smart and kind and funny and brave. Clara already wants to be your aunt. Meeting you is just going to make her more sure of that." Sophie threw her arms around his neck. "I'm glad you found her, Daddy." "Me too, baby girl. Me too." Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp, autumn at its finest. Ethan made pancakes again, a ritual that helped calm his nerves, while Sophie got dressed in her new purple dress and insisted on picking out her own socks, settling on mismatched ones covered in stars and rainbows. "Mommy used to wear mismatched socks," Sophie announced, sitting on her bed while Ethan brushed her hair. "Mrs. Chen told me. She said Mommy said life was too short for matching socks." Ethan's hands stilled. Did Mrs. Chen know Mommy? No, but she talked to other people who did. She wanted to tell me stories about Mommy so I'd know her better. Sophie turned to look at him. "Was that okay?" "That was very okay." Ethan resumed brushing, gentle with the tangles. "What else did Mrs. Chen tell you?" "That Mommy loved chocolate ice cream and reading books and helping people, and that she loved you and me more than anything in the whole world." "She did. She really did." They arrived at Riverside Park at 2 o'clock. Clara was already there, sitting on a bench near the playground, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She stood when she saw them approaching, and Ethan watched her face transform as she got her first look at Sophie. The resemblance would be obvious to her. Sophie with Emma's eyes, Emma's smile, Emma's way of moving through the world with equal parts confidence and curiosity. "Hi," Clara said, her voice barely steady. She looked at Ethan, then back at Sophie. "You must be Sophie." Sophie stepped forward, suddenly shy. "You look like my mommy." "I know." Clara's eyes were already wet. "Your daddy explained that we're twins. That means we looked exactly the same." "Can I see your face better?" Clara knelt down, bringing herself to Sophie's eye level. Sophie studied her carefully, her small hand reaching out to touch Clara's cheek, as if confirming she was real. "You have a freckle right here," Sophie said, pointing to a spot near Clara's left eye. "Just like Mommy's pictures." "Do I?" Clara's voice cracked. "And your eyes are the same color. Daddy calls them amber, like the stones we found at the beach." "Your daddy's right." Clara smiled through her tears. "Can I tell you something, Sophie? I've been looking for my family for a very long time, and finding out about your mommy, about Emma, it made me sad because I'll never get to meet her. But finding out about you makes me happy, because you're my family too." Sophie considered this with the gravity she brought to important decisions. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Clara's neck. "I'm glad we found you." Clara's composure broke. She hugged Sophie back, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking with the force of emotions too big to contain. Ethan watched from a few feet away, his own vision blurring, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. This was grief and healing happening simultaneously, loss and discovery intertwined. The past meeting the present in the form of a 6-year-old girl who carried her mother's face and her mother's generous heart. When Clara and Sophie finally pulled apart, Clara wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cry all over you." "It's okay." Sophie patted Clara's shoulder. "Daddy cries sometimes too, about Mommy. He thinks I don't see, but I do." Clara looked up at Ethan, something passing between them, an understanding, a shared pain, a recognition of the weight they both carried. "How about we go to the playground?" Ethan suggested gently.
Sophie can show you her favorite things. Sophie grabbed Clara's hand without hesitation. I can go really high on the swings now. Daddy used to have to push me, but now I can pump my legs myself, and I can do the monkey bars almost all the way across. They spent the next 2 hours at the park. Sophie showed Clara every piece of equipment, narrating her achievements and asking Clara questions about her life.
Did she like teaching? What was her favorite color? Did she have any pets? Had she ever been to Disneyland? Clara answered each question with attention and care, clearly trying to memorize every detail, every expression, every moment of this first meeting with her niece. Ethan hung back, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if Sophie needed him. But she didn't. She'd accepted Clara with the simple faith of childhood, taking her appearance in their lives as just another fact of the world, no more strange than penguins in Antarctica or identical twins sharing an egg. At one point, Sophie convinced Clara to go down the slide with her. They climbed the ladder together, Sophie's hand in Clara's, and slid down shrieking with laughter. At the bottom, Clara looked up at Ethan with an expression of pure joy mixed with sorrow so deep it seemed bottomless. She was falling in love with this child who was her only connection to the sister she'd never known, and every moment of happiness was shadowed by the grief of what she'd lost. When Sophie ran off to the swings, Clara joined Ethan on a bench. "She's incredible," Clara said quietly. "She's so much like... I never knew Emma, but I can see myself in her. Our mannerisms, the way she talks with her hands. It's like looking at a tiny version of both of us." "Emma would have loved that," Ethan said. "She always wanted Sophie to be confident, curious, kind. She's all those things. Because of you." Clara looked at him. "You raised her to be that way. I try. Most days I feel like I'm failing." "You're not." Clara's voice was firm. "Look at her, Ethan. She's happy. She's secure. She feels loved. That's not failure." They watched Sophie swing higher and higher, her purple dress billowing, her laughter carrying across the playground. Other children played nearby, parents chatted on benches, dogs ran through the grass. The world continuing its normal rhythm while 3 people sat inside a bubble of extraordinary circumstances. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said after a moment. "About Emma. About your life together. Anything. What was she like? Really like, not just the highlights, but the real person." Ethan thought about it, trying to distill 7 years of love into words. She was stubborn, fiercely loyal. She cried during sad commercials and laughed at her own jokes before she got to the punchline. She was terrible at cooking anything that wasn't pasta, and she always put other people first, sometimes to a fault. Clara listened intently, her eyes fixed on his face. "She had this way of making everyone feel seen," Ethan continued. "Like, when she looked at you, really looked at you, you were the only person in the world who mattered in that moment. She did it with her patients at the hospital, with Sophie, with me." His voice roughened. "I miss that the most. Being seen by her." "I wish I could have known her," Clara whispered. "I wish you could have too. You would have liked each other." Emma always wanted siblings. She was raised by her grandmother after her parents died, and she used to talk about how lonely it was being an only child. "If she'd known about you..." He trailed off, unable to finish. "We could have grown up together." Clara's tears started fresh. "We could have had everything sisters have, inside jokes and shared memories and someone who understood us completely." "Yeah, you could have." Sophie ran back to them, breathless and glowing. "Clara, come see the big tree. There's a hollow part where animals live, and sometimes we see squirrels." Clara let Sophie pull her toward the oak tree at the edge of the playground. Ethan followed at a distance, watching them inspect the tree hollow, Sophie pointing out features while Clara crouched beside her, giving her full attention. They looked like they belonged together. Aunt and niece. Family. As the afternoon shadows grew longer, Sophie started to tire. She leaned against Clara on the bench, yawning, her earlier energy fading. "I think someone needs to go home," Ethan said gently. Sophie protested half-heartedly, then looked up at Clara. "Can you come to our house? I want to show you my room and my toys and the picture wall Daddy made with Mommy's photos." Clara glanced at Ethan, asking silent permission. He nodded. "If you'd like to, no pressure." "I'd love to," Clara said. At the house, Sophie gave Clara a comprehensive tour, showing her every corner of the place that had been home for her entire life. The kitchen where they made pancakes, the living room where they had movie nights, her bedroom with its purple walls and overflowing bookshelf, and then the hallway wall where Ethan had hung a timeline of Emma's life. Pictures from childhood, college, their wedding, Sophie's birth. The last photo taken of Emma 2 days before the accident. Clara stood in front of the wall for a long time, her fingers hovering over the images but not quite touching, as if Emma's face in the photographs was too sacred to disturb. "This was her," Clara said, her voice thick. "This was my sister's life." "This was her life," Ethan confirmed. "And now you're part of Sophie's life, part of our family. If you want to be." Clara turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "I want to be, more than anything. But Ethan, I don't want to replace her, or make anyone forget her, or it—" "You couldn't replace her if you tried," Ethan interrupted gently. "You're not Emma. You're Clara, and that's who we want to know. That's who Sophie needs, her Aunt Clara, not a substitute mother." Sophie appeared in the hallway, elephant tucked under her arm. "Are you staying for dinner? We're having spaghetti. It's Mommy's recipe." "Well, actually, it's from a jar, but Mommy used to make it, so Daddy calls it her recipe." Clara laughed through her tears. "I would love to stay for dinner." They ate spaghetti at the kitchen table, Sophie chattering about school and friends while Ethan and Clara exchanged glances over her head, both of them aware they were creating something new here, a family configuration that hadn't existed before. Aunt, niece, and father, bound together by the ghost of a woman who'd never known she had a twin but whose love was somehow still bringing people together. After dinner, Sophie started fading, her eyes growing heavy. Clara helped Ethan get her ready for bed, reading her the moon book while Ethan listened from the doorway. Clara's voice caught on certain phrases, but she pushed through, and when Sophie's eyes finally closed, Clara carefully set the book aside and kissed Sophie's forehead. "Sweet dreams, Sophie," she whispered. "Love you, Aunt Clara," Sophie murmured, already half asleep. Clara froze, looked up at Ethan with wide, disbelieving eyes. He nodded, confirming she'd heard correctly. Sophie had claimed her, had given her the title and the love that came with it, as simple and generous as that. In the living room, after Sophie was fully asleep, Clara and Ethan sat on opposite ends of the couch, the weight of the day settling over them. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "For today. For Sophie. For telling me about Emma. For letting me be part of this." "Thank you for being willing to be part of it," Ethan countered. "I know this isn't easy, walking into a ready-made family, taking on all this grief and history. It's worth it." Clara's voice was fierce. "Sophie is worth it. And maybe—" She hesitated. "Maybe this is why I never felt complete. Why I always felt like something was missing. Because Emma was out there, and we were supposed to find each other. And somehow, even though she's gone, we still did." Ethan thought about that. About the impossibility of the timing. The coincidence of Marcus setting up a blind date with Emma's twin sister. About Sophie asking Mrs. Chen about her mother just days before Clara walked into their lives. "Maybe you're right," he said softly. Clara stood to leave, gathering her coat and purse. At the door, she turned back. "Can I come visit again? Spend more time with Sophie?" "Anytime. You're family now. You don't need an invitation." She hugged him then, quick and fierce, and Ethan found himself hugging back. This woman who wore his dead wife's face but had her own heart, her own story, her own place in their lives. After Clara left, Ethan checked on Sophie one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, elephant clutched tight, a small smile on her face. Tomorrow they'd wake up to a world that included Aunt Clara. Tomorrow, and all the days after that, Sophie would have more family, more love, more connection to the mother she'd lost. And somehow, impossibly, that felt like exactly what Emma would have wanted. The weeks that followed Clara's first visit settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and surreal. She came over twice during the week after work, staying for dinner and bedtime stories, and every Saturday afternoon became their standing time together at the park, or the children's museum, or simply at the house, where Sophie would drag Clara from room to room, showing her treasures and telling stories with the unselfconscious enthusiasm of childhood. Ethan watched it all unfold with a mixture of gratitude and something else he couldn't quite name. Every time Clara laughed, he heard Emma's laugh. Every time she tilted her head in thought, he saw Emma's gesture. Every time she smiled at Sophie with unconditional love shining in her eyes, he felt the ghost of his wife standing beside them, watching her twin sister love her daughter. It was beautiful and painful in equal measure. One evening in late October, after Sophie had gone to bed and Clara was gathering her things to leave, she paused in the hallway in front of Emma's photo wall. She did this often, Ethan had noticed, as if checking in with her sister, seeking permission or guidance, or simply connection with the woman she'd never known. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said without turning around. "And you can say no if it's too much." "Okay?" Ethan came to stand beside her. "Do you have more pictures?" "Of Emma, I mean. From her childhood, her life before you met her?" Ethan's chest tightened. "Her grandmother kept albums. They're in storage in the attic. I haven't looked at them since before the accident. I understand if you don't want to." "No." Ethan cut her off gently. "You should see them. She was your sister. You have a right to know her whole story, not just the parts I was there for." They climbed the narrow stairs to the attic the following Saturday, while Sophie was at a birthday party with one of her school friends. The space was dusty and cramped, filled with boxes Ethan had been avoiding for 3 years. He found the one labeled Emma, Photos, in his own handwriting, black marker on brown cardboard, and carried it downstairs to the living room. Clara sat on the floor as Ethan opened the box, revealing stack after stack of photo albums, with dates written on the spines in elegant cursive. Emma's grandmother's handwriting, meticulous and loving. Clara reached for the oldest album with trembling hands. The cover read, "Emma, birth to age 5. And when she opened it, her breath caught audibly. The first photo showed a tiny infant in a hospital bassinet, wrapped in a pink blanket, eyes squeezed shut, one small fist raised as if in protest at being born. The caption beneath read, "Emma Rose, December 15, 1988, 6:47 a.m., 6 Paos, 3 Oz. "I was born at 6:52, Clara whispered. 5 minutes later. We were born 5 minutes apart, and I never knew." She turned the pages slowly, reverently. Baby Emma learning to sit up, to crawl, to walk. Toddler Emma covered in finger paint, grinning at the camera. 4-year-old Emma missing her front teeth, holding a kindergarten diploma. "We had the same baby face," Clara said, running her finger over a photo of Emma at 2 years old. "Look at the eyes. The exact same shape." Ethan sat beside her, seeing the photos with new eyes. He'd looked through these albums before, when Emma was alive, listening to her narrate her childhood with affection and occasional embarrassment. But he'd never thought to look for a missing twin, never thought to see these pictures as evidence of a separation, a loss neither twin had known they'd suffered. Clara moved through the albums methodically, examining each photo as if committing it to memory. Emma at 7, gap-toothed and proud on her first day of 2nd grade, the same age Clara now taught. Emma at 10 with her grandmother at the beach. Emma at 13, awkward and beautiful in the way of all young teenagers. Emma at 16 in a homecoming dress. At 18 graduating high school. At 21 raising a champagne glass at her college graduation. She looked happy, Clara said when she reached the last album, which ended with photos from just before Ethan and Emma had started dating. In almost every picture, she looks genuinely happy. Her grandmother loved her fiercely, Ethan said. She made sure Emma knew she was wanted, cherished, even if she couldn't tell her the whole truth about her birth. Clara looked up sharply. "You think her grandmother knew? About me?" "I don't know, maybe. Or maybe she only knew what the adoption agency told her." Ethan paused, weighing his next words carefully. "I've been thinking about that. About what happened to separate you two. Whether it was a choice someone made or just the system failing. I've been thinking about it too." Clara closed the album and set it carefully on top of the others. "I reached out to the adoption agency that handled my case. They're looking through their records, but it's been over 30 years. A lot of files from that era aren't digitized. If you find anything, you'll be the first to know." Clara met his eyes. "We're in this together now. Whatever we find out, good or bad, it affects both of us. It affects Sophie." The doorbell rang before Ethan could respond. Sophie burst through the door moments later, party hat askew, face painted like a butterfly, talking a mile a minute about cake and games and presents. "Aunt Clara, you're still here!" She launched herself at Clara, who caught her and swung her around. "I am. Your dad and I were looking at old pictures of your mom." Sophie's eyes went wide. "Can I see?" They spent the rest of the afternoon on the living room floor, Sophie between them, looking through the albums. Clara and Ethan took turns telling Sophie stories about the photos, Clara imagining what Emma might have been thinking or feeling based on her own childhood experiences, Ethan filling in details Emma had told him over the years. "This one," Sophie said, pointing to a photo of 8-year-old Emma holding a trophy. "What's this for?" "Spelling bee," Ethan said. "Your mom told me she studied for weeks. Her grandmother quizzed her every night at dinner." "She looks proud," Sophie observed. "She was. She kept that trophy in her room until college." Ethan smiled at the memory. "She told me she liked spelling because words had rules. They made sense in a way other things didn't." Clara touched the photo lightly. "I won my school spelling bee too, 3rd grade. I still have the trophy in my apartment." Sophie looked between them, her young mind making connections. "Because you're twins. You like the same things." "Maybe," Clara said softly, "or maybe it's just a coincidence." But Ethan could see in her eyes that she didn't believe it was coincidence. She was finding herself in these photos, seeing her own childhood reflected in her sister's, recognizing the patterns and preferences that came from sharing DNA even when separated by circumstance. As evening approached and Clara prepared to leave, Sophie hugged her tight. "Can you come to my school show next week? We're doing a play about autumn, and I'm a leaf that falls from a tree." Clara glanced at Ethan, checking for permission. He nodded. "I'll be there," Clara promised. "Front row." After Clara left and Sophie was in bed, Ethan found himself back at the photo albums, unable to let them go just yet. He opened the one from Emma's teenage years and found a photo he'd forgotten about. Emma at 17, sitting in her grandmother's kitchen, writing in a journal, completely absorbed in whatever she was recording. On the back, in her grandmother's handwriting, Emma writing about her dreams, always such big dreams for such a small girl. Ethan wondered what those dreams had been, whether they'd included finding a twin sister she didn't know existed, whether some part of her had always felt incomplete, the way Clara described feeling her whole life. His phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "Thank you for sharing those photos, for letting me see her life. I know it couldn't have been easy going through those memories." He typed back, "It was easier than I expected, and I think Emma would want you to know her story, all of it. I found something tonight when I got home, a box my adoptive mother left me before she died. I never opened it because I was too afraid of what might be inside, but after seeing Emma's life today, I think I'm ready. Would you want to be there when I open it? I could use the support." Ethan stared at the message. This was moving beyond just connecting Clara with Sophie. This was becoming something deeper, a partnership in uncovering a shared history that affected them both. But wasn't that what family did? Supported each other through hard things? "When?" he typed. "Tomorrow?" "Sophie could come too if you think she'd want to. This is her history as much as ours." Ethan thought about it, then made a decision. "Let's do it at my place. After lunch. I'll make sure Sophie understands what we're doing and why it matters." The next day, Ethan explained to Sophie over pancakes that Aunt Clara had some things from her adoptive mother that might help them understand how she and Emma got separated. Sophie listened with the seriousness she brought to important matters, then asked the question that cut right to the heart of it. "Will it make Aunt Clara sad?" "It might," Ethan admitted. "Sometimes learning about the past can be hard, but it's important too. It helps us understand where we come from. Like how learning about penguins helps us understand Antarctica." Ethan had to smile. Exactly like that. Clara arrived at 1 o'clock carrying a medium-sized cardboard box that had clearly been sealed for years. Packing tape yellowed with age crossed the top, and Clara's name was written on the side in faded blue ink. They settled in the living room, Sophie on the couch between them, watching with curious eyes as Clara took a deep breath and reached for a knife to cut the tape. "My adoptive mother gave this to me when I was 18, Clara explained, her hands shaking slightly. "She said it contained everything she knew about my adoption, but she also said I should only open it when I was ready to know the truth, Whatever that truth might be, I've carried it with me through 5 moves, always too scared to look inside. But you're ready now? Sophie asked. I think so. Because now I know I have family who will help me understand whatever's in here. Clara looked at Ethan, then at Sophie. I'm not alone anymore. The tape gave way and Clara opened the flaps. Inside were manila folders, a few photographs, and a sealed envelope with Clara written on the front in different handwriting than the box. Clara reached for the envelope first. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal and pulled out several pages of handwritten letter. It's from my adoptive mother, she said, scanning the first page. She wrote it before she died. She began reading aloud, her voice wavering. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're searching for answers I should have given you while I was alive. I was a coward. I told myself I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself from the questions I didn't want to answer. The truth is this. You were not simply adopted through normal channels. Your biological mother died in childbirth, and you were one of 2 babies born that day. Twins. The hospital social worker separated you because they believed one adoptive family couldn't afford 2 babies, and in those days, they often split multiples to give them better opportunities. Your sister went to a different family, also in Portland. I tried to find out what happened to her over the years, but the records were sealed. I failed you in not trying harder. I failed both of you. Clara's voice broke. She couldn't continue reading, so Ethan gently took the letter from her shaking hands. He read the rest aloud while Clara wept quietly beside him. I want you to know that I loved you from the moment I held you. You were wanted, cherished, mine in every way that mattered. But you were also incomplete, and I saw it in you your whole life. The way you searched for connection, for belonging, for the missing piece you couldn't name. I hope you find her, Clara. I hope you find your sister and that she's had a good life. I hope she'll forgive me for not fighting harder to keep you together. All my love, Mom. Sophie reached over and took Clara's hand. Your mom loved you, she said simply. She said so in the letter. She did, Clara managed through tears. She really did. Ethan set the letter aside and reached for the manila folders. The first contained Clara's original birth certificate, and there, in stark black and white, was proof of everything they'd theorized. Mother's name, Patricia Hayes. Father, unknown. Birth, December 15th, 1988, Sacred Heart Hospital, Portland, Oregon. Twin A, Emma Rose Hayes. Twin B, Clara Marie Hayes. Emma Rose Hayes, Clara whispered, seeing her sister's name on an official document for the first time. She was baby A. She was born first. By 5 minutes, Ethan confirmed, his throat tight. The second folder contained adoption paperwork showing Clara had been placed with David and Margaret Chen on December 20th, 1988, 5 days after birth. 5 days during which someone had decided these twins would be better off apart than together. The third folder was thinner, containing only a single sheet of paper. A note from the hospital social worker who'd handled the case, written in 1989. Attempted to locate twin A, Emma Rose, for medical history purposes. Records indicate she was placed with maternal grandmother, Patricia Hayes' mother, Constance Hayes, on December 18, 1988. Caseworker noted Mrs. Hayes was elderly and in poor health, but insisted on raising her granddaughter. Twin B, Clara Marie, placed with younger couple better equipped financially for child rearing. Decision made in best interest of both children given limited resources of biological family. So they knew, Clara said flatly. The whole time, the agency knew Emma went to our biological grandmother. They knew we were in the same city for years, and they never told anyone. It was a different time, Ethan said, though the words felt hollow. They thought they were doing the right thing. They were wrong. Clara's grief was hardening into anger. They took away our choice, Emma's grandmother's choice, my parents' choice. They decided for everyone. Sophie was watching Clara with concerned eyes. Aunt Clara, are you mad? Clara took a shaky breath and pulled Sophie into a hug. I'm mad at the people who separated us. But I'm not mad at you or your daddy or anyone here. I'm just sad we lost so much time. But you found us now, Sophie pointed out with 6-year-old logic. You're here now. I am. Clara held Sophie tighter. I am here now. They spent the rest of the afternoon going through the remaining contents of the box. Photos of Clara as a baby, looking identical to the baby photos of Emma in the albums they'd looked at the day before. Medical records showing both twins had been healthy at birth. A tiny hospital bracelet with Baby B. Hayes printed on it. Each item was a piece of a story that should have been shared but wasn't. Each document evidence of a decision made by people who thought they knew best, who'd split two souls that had shared a womb, who'd created an absence neither twin could name but both had felt. As the light outside began to fade, Clara carefully repacked the box, handling each item with reverence. "I should take this to the agency," she said. "Show them what their policy cost us. Make sure they never do this to another set of twins." "They don't do it anymore," Ethan said gently. "Practices changed decades ago. Keeping siblings together became standard." "But it's too late for Emma and me." Clara's voice was hollow. "She lived her whole life not knowing I existed." She died not knowing. And I'll never get to tell her I was looking for her, that I always felt like something was missing, that I would have loved her. Sophie climbed into Clara's lap, wrapping her small arms around her aunt's neck. "But you can love me," she said, "and I'm part of Mommy, so it's kind of like loving her too." Clara broke down completely then, holding Sophie and sobbing with a grief that had been building for 33 years. The grief of a twin who'd felt incomplete her whole life and now knew why. The grief of missed birthdays and holidays, of shared experiences that never happened, of a sister's love she'd never receive. Ethan let them cry together, this aunt and niece bound by blood and loss, and found his own eyes wet. For Emma, who died without knowing she had a sister. For Clara, who'd searched and found only absence. For Sophie, who was learning too young that life was full of beautiful, terrible things that existed side by side. When the storm of Clara's grief finally passed, she wiped her eyes and managed a weak smile. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fall apart like that." "Don't apologize," Ethan said. "You're allowed to grieve. You lost something huge even if you didn't know you'd lost it until now." "I keep thinking about all the what-ifs," Clara admitted. "What if the social worker had tried harder to keep us together? What if my parents had known about Emma and fought to adopt both of us? What if Emma's grandmother had been given support instead of having Clara taken away?" She shook her head. "The what-ifs could drive me crazy." "So we focus on what is," Ethan said firmly. "You're here. Sophie's here. We're family. That's what Emma would want us to focus on." Clara looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "How do you do it? How do you stay so strong when you lost the person you loved most?" "I don't feel strong most days. I feel like I'm barely holding it together." Ethan glanced at Sophie, who was studying both adults with careful attention. "But I have to, for her. And now I have help. You're here, and that makes it easier." "I want to be here," Clara said. "Not just for Sophie, but for you too. You've lost so much, and I know I can't replace Emma, but maybe I can be family in a different way." Before Ethan could respond, Sophie yawned hugely, breaking the tension. "I'm hungry. Can we have dinner?" They made spaghetti again. It was becoming their tradition, and ate at the kitchen table while Sophie told them about the upcoming school play, demonstrating her leaf-falling technique with dramatic flair. The normalcy of it grounded them all after the emotional afternoon. After dinner, while Ethan cleaned up, Clara helped Sophie with her homework at the kitchen table. Watching them together, heads bent over a math worksheet, Clara explaining patiently while Sophie concentrated hard, Ethan felt something click into place in his chest. This was what family looked like. Not perfect, not without pain, but real and present and full of love despite everything. That night, after Sophie was asleep and Clara had gone home, Ethan stood in front of Emma's photo wall again. He looked at his wife's face, at the amber eyes that Sophie and Clara shared, at the smile that had lit up his world for 7 years. "I hope this is okay," he said softly to the photos. "Bringing Clara into our lives, letting her love Sophie. I think you'd want this. I think you'd want your daughter to know her aunt, to have that connection to you." He paused, swallowing hard. "I miss you. Every single day I miss you. But Clara being here helps somehow. It makes the missing hurt a little less." The photos didn't answer, of course,
But in the quiet of the house, Ethan felt something that might have been peace. Or if not peace, then acceptance. Acceptance that love didn't end with death, that family could grow in unexpected ways. That Emma's legacy wasn't just Sophie, but also the connection between twin sisters who'd found each other too late and just in time. Over the following weeks, Clara became an integral part of their daily routine. She picked Sophie up from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, giving Ethan time to work late on projects that needed his attention. She came to Sophie's Leaf performance and cheered louder than anyone else. She started keeping a drawer of her things at Ethan's house, a toothbrush, a change of clothes, books she was reading to Sophie. It felt natural, this expansion of their family, but it also felt dangerous in ways Ethan couldn't quite articulate. Because every time Clara laughed, every time she pushed Sophie on the swing, every time she sat at Emma's place at the dinner table, Ethan felt his heart doing something complicated. He was starting to care about Clara, not as Emma's replacement. He understood now that Clara was her own person, different from Emma in crucial ways despite their identical appearance. But as Clara herself, as the woman who'd opened her heart to a ready-made family, who'd grieved for a sister she'd never known, who'd loved Sophie with a fierceness that took his breath away, and that terrified him. One evening in early November, after Sophie was in bed, Clara and Ethan sat on the couch with tea, a habit they'd fallen into on the nights Clara stayed late. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the kitchen clock and the occasional creak of old wood settling. "Can I tell you something?" Clara said, cradling her mug. "And you promise not to think I'm crazy?" "I promise." Sometimes when I'm with Sophie, I feel Emma's presence. Not like a ghost or anything supernatural, but like, she struggled for words, like I can feel what she would have felt, the love she would have had for Sophie, the pride in watching her grow. And it's my feeling, but it's also hers somehow. Does that make any sense? Ethan thought about it, about the connection between twins that science couldn't fully explain. "Yeah, it makes sense. You shared everything before you were born. Maybe some of that connection survived the separation." "I like thinking that," Clara said softly. "I like thinking that in some way, through me, Emma still gets to love her daughter." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Ethan found himself saying, "I'm glad you found us. I know the circumstances are terrible, and I know you'd rather have found Emma alive. But for Sophie's sake, and for mine too, I'm glad you're here." Clara looked at him, her amber eyes bright in the lamplight. "I'm glad too. This family, being Sophie's aunt, it's given me the belonging I've been searching for my whole life." She paused. "You've given me that, Ethan, by letting me in, by trusting me with Sophie, by sharing Emma's story. You've given me a gift I can never repay. You don't have to repay it. That's what family does." "Is that what we are? Family?" "Yeah," Ethan said, meaning it with his whole heart. "That's exactly what we are." Clara smiled, and in that smile, Ethan saw both Emma and Clara at once. Saw the past and the present, grief and healing, loss and discovery all woven together into something new. Something that looked a lot like hope. The shift happened so gradually that Ethan almost didn't notice it at first. It started with small things. The way his heart would lift when Clara's car pulled into the driveway. The way he found himself checking his phone for her messages. The way he'd started buying the herbal tea she liked and keeping it in his kitchen cabinet next to his coffee. It was Marcus who finally called him out on it. They were at the gym on a Saturday morning in mid-November, Sophie at Clara's apartment for what had become their regular weekend breakfast tradition. Ethan was on the treadmill, Marcus on the one beside him, when his best friend said without preamble, "So when are you going to admit you have feelings for Clara?" Ethan nearly fell off the machine. "What? No, that's not... I don't..." "Ethan, brother, I've known you for 15 years. I know what you look like when you're falling for someone." Marcus slowed his treadmill to a walk. "And you've got it bad. She's Emma's twin sister." "When?" Ethan's voice came out harsher than intended. "That would be... I can't even think about her that way. It's wrong." "Why is it wrong?" "Because Emma's only been gone 3 years. Because Clara looks exactly like her. Because Sophie needs an aunt, not a stepmother. Because..." Ethan stopped, breathing hard, and not from the running. "Because I feel like I'm betraying Emma every time I catch myself looking at Clara and seeing someone other than my dead wife's sister." Marcus hit the emergency stop button on both treadmills.
Off. Now. We're getting coffee and talking about this properly." 20 minutes later, they were in the gym's cafe, both nursing overpriced lattes, while Ethan stared into his cup like it held answers. "Listen to me," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. "Emma's been gone for 3 years. 3 years of you raising Sophie alone, of putting your life on hold, of being the best father you could be while dying inside. Nobody, and I mean nobody, would judge you for developing feelings for someone. But it's Clara. It's Emma's identical twin. How can I separate them in my mind?" "Can you?" Marcus asked. "When you're with Clara, are you really seeing Emma or are you seeing Clara?" Ethan thought about it, really thought about the way Clara moved through his house with a confidence Emma never had, rearranging things to suit her without asking because she'd become that comfortable with them. About how Clara's laugh was different from Emma's, louder, more unguarded. About how Clara seasoned food differently, dressed differently, approached problems from angles Emma never would have considered. "I see Clara," he admitted quietly. "More and more I see Clara. She's not Emma, she's her own person. And you have feelings for that person." It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "I don't know, maybe. I'm terrified to even examine it too closely." "Why?" "Because what if I'm just replacing Emma? What if I'm using Clara to fill the hole Emma left? What if I'm confusing gratitude for her loving Sophie with actual romantic feelings?" Ethan ran his hands through his hair. "And what about Clara? How is she supposed to feel knowing the man who loved her sister might have feelings for her? Isn't that impossibly complicated?" "Life is impossibly complicated," Marcus pointed out. "But here's what I see. 2 people who've been through trauma, who found each other in the weirdest circumstances possible, who are building something real together. Maybe it's just friendship and family, but maybe it's more. And you won't know unless you're honest with yourself about what you're feeling." "Sophie needs Clara as her aunt," Ethan said. "I can't risk that relationship by making things awkward." "So, you're going to ignore your feelings forever?" "If I have to." Ethan met Marcus's eyes. "Sophie comes first. Always. Her relationship with Clara is more important than any feelings I might have." Marcus looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "Okay. But Ethan, Emma would want you to be happy. She'd want you to live, not just exist. Think about that." The conversation haunted Ethan for the rest of the day. When Clara dropped Sophie off that afternoon, he found himself hyper-aware of everything about her, the way her sweater brought out the amber in her eyes, the way she'd pulled her hair back in a messy bun that Emma would never have worn, the way she hugged him goodbye, a quick squeeze that had become routine but now felt charged with possibility. "You okay?" Clara asked, pulling back to study his face. "You seem distracted." "Just tired," Ethan lied. "Long workout this morning." Sophie bounded between them. "Aunt Clara taught me to make French toast, the real way, with vanilla and cinnamon. Can we make it tomorrow, Daddy?" "Sure, Soph." Ethan kept his eyes on his daughter, safer than looking at Clara. "Sounds great." After Clara left, Sophie chattered about their morning while Ethan made lunch, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Marcus's words, about Emma, about the impossible situation he'd found himself in. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan pulled out the journal his therapist had recommended he keep after Emma died. He'd written in it sporadically over the years, mostly on the hardest days when the grief threatened to swallow him whole. Now he opened to a fresh page and started writing. "I think I have feelings for Clara. Writing that down makes it real in a way that terrifies me. I don't know when it started. Maybe it was always there, from the moment she walked into that restaurant wearing Emma's face. Or maybe it grew slowly as I watched her love Sophie, as I learned who she is beyond just being Emma's twin. But it's there now, undeniable, and I don't know what to do with it. Emma, if you can somehow read this, I need you to know I'm not trying to replace you. I could never replace you. But Clara is here and you're not, and I'm so tired of being alone. I'm tired of carrying all this grief by myself. And Clara understands it in a way nobody else can because she's grieving you too. She's grieving the sister she never got to know. Does that make it okay? Does that make it wrong? I don't have answers. All I know is that I look forward to seeing her every day, And when she's not here, the house feels emptier than it did before she came into our lives. What do I do with that? He set down the pen and closed the journal, no closer to answers but feeling marginally better for having articulated the thoughts that had been swirling in his head for weeks. The next few weeks were torture. Ethan tried to maintain normalcy, tried to treat Clara exactly as he always had, but he was painfully aware of every interaction, every glance, every accidental touch. If Clara noticed anything different, she didn't say, but sometimes Ethan caught her watching him with a puzzled expression, as if trying to figure out what had changed. Thanksgiving approached, and Clara asked tentatively one evening if she could spend it with them. "I don't want to impose," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear in that gesture that was pure Emma. "If you have family traditions or other plans—" "Your family," Sophie interrupted before Ethan could respond. "Of course you should be here for Thanksgiving, right, Daddy?" "Right," Ethan agreed, his heart doing that complicated thing again. "We'd love to have you." Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and clear. Ethan woke early to start the turkey, a recipe Emma had perfected over their years together. He found himself talking to her as he worked, a habit he'd developed after she died and never quite broken. "Clara's coming for Thanksgiving," he said softly, basting the turkey. "Your twin sister is going to sit at our table and eat the meal you taught me to make. I think you'd like that. I think you'd like her." He paused. "I think you'd want us to be happy, Em. I'm trying. I'm really trying." Clara arrived at noon with homemade pumpkin pies and a cranberry sauce recipe she'd found online. She moved through the kitchen alongside Ethan with easy familiarity, their movements synchronized from weeks of cooking together. Sophie set the table with the good china, arranging fall leaves she'd collected as a centerpiece. The meal was beautiful. The turkey was perfect. The sides all came together, and for the first time in 3 years, Ethan's Thanksgiving table felt full. They held hands before eating, Ethan, Sophie, and Clara forming a small circle, and Ethan stumbled through a prayer of gratitude that Emma's grandmother had taught them. "I'm thankful for Aunt Clara," Sophie announced when it was her turn to share, "because she's family, and she loves me, and she makes Daddy smile more." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I'm thankful for both of you, for being found when I thought I was lost, for giving me a family when I thought I'd never have one." Ethan's turn came last. He looked at Sophie, then at Clara, and felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. "I'm thankful for second chances, for healing, for the people who show up when we need them most." Clara's gaze met his across the table, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Ethan looked away first, reaching for the serving spoon, breaking the moment before it could become something he wasn't ready to name. After dinner, while Sophie played in the living room with new crayons Clara had brought, Ethan and Clara tackled the mountain of dishes together. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of running water and clinking plates filling the kitchen. "Can I ask you something personal?" Clara said eventually, scrubbing at a stubborn pan. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Sure. Do you ever think about dating again? Moving on with your life?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "Why do you ask?" "Sarah mentioned it the other day. She said it's been 3 years and she thinks you should start putting yourself out there again." Clara kept her eyes on the pan. "I told her to mind her own business, but it made me think, you're still young, Ethan. You have so much life ahead of you. You shouldn't spend it alone." "I'm not alone. I have Sophie. I have you." The words came out before Ethan could stop them. Clara finally looked up at him. "You have me as Sophie's aunt, as family. But that's not the same as having a partner, someone to share your life with." "I know that." Ethan dried his hands on a towel, needing something to do with them. "But the thought of dating, of letting someone new into our lives, into Sophie's life, I can't imagine it. I can't imagine anyone understanding what we've been through." "No one could understand the way someone who's lived it could," Clara said quietly. "Someone who knows what it's like to lose Emma, to grieve her, to love Sophie, because she's Emma's daughter." The air between them suddenly felt charged. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but Sophie's voice called from the living room. "Daddy! Aunt Clara! Come see what I drew!" The moment shattered. They joined Sophie on the living room floor, admiring her drawing of the three of them holding hands with Emma drawn as an angel above them. Clara made a soft, choked sound and pulled Sophie into a hug. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Ethan managed, his voice rough. "I wanted to show that Mommy's still with us," Sophie explained, "even though she's in heaven, because you always say love doesn't end, right, Daddy?" "Right, love doesn't end." That night, after Clara had gone home and Sophie was tucked into bed, Ethan stood once again in front of Emma's photo wall. But this time, instead of talking to the pictures, he found himself imagining what Emma would say if she were really there. She'd tell him to stop being an idiot, probably. She'd tell him that life was for living, that love wasn't a finite resource that ran out when she died. She'd tell him that if he had feelings for Clara, he needed to be honest about them, with himself, with Clara, with Sophie. But she wasn't there to tell him any of those things. So Ethan was left alone with his confusion and his guilt and his growing certainty that what he felt for Clara was more than gratitude or friendship or the comfort of familiar features. It was love. Different from what he'd felt for Emma, but no less real. And he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. December arrived with the first snow of the season. Sophie was beside herself with excitement, dragging Clara and Ethan outside to build a snowman the moment enough had accumulated. They worked together, rolling massive balls of snow, Sophie directing them like a tiny general. "The middle one needs to be bigger," she commanded. "And we need a carrot for the nose and rocks for the eyes, and Daddy's old scarf for decoration." Clara was laughing, her cheeks pink from cold, snow dusting her dark hair. She looked so alive, so present, so completely herself in that moment that Ethan's heart ached with the force of what he felt for her. She caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing. Just, you look happy." "I am happy." She said it like a revelation, like happiness was something she'd forgotten was possible. "For the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Sophie pelted them both with snowballs, breaking the tension, and they spent the next hour in an epic snow battle that left all three of them soaked and freezing. Back inside, Clara made hot chocolate while Ethan got Sophie changed into dry clothes, and they ended up on the couch wrapped in blankets, watching Christmas movies and drinking cocoa from oversized mugs. It felt like family. It felt like home. It felt like something Ethan wanted to last forever. "I should probably go," Clara said eventually, though she made no move to stand. "Let you guys have your evening." "Stay," Sophie said immediately. "We're watching Rudolph next, and you have to stay for Rudolph." Clara looked at Ethan questioningly. He should say yes, that it was late and she should probably head home. He should create some distance before these feelings got any stronger. But instead, he heard himself say, "Stay, please." So she stayed. They watched Rudolph and then Frosty the Snowman, Sophie gradually falling asleep between them. When her eyes finally closed completely, her head resting on Clara's shoulder, neither adult moved, not wanting to wake her. "This is nice," Clara whispered, "playing family for a day." "It's not playing," Ethan said before he could stop himself. "This is family. This is real." Clara turned to look at him, careful not to jostle Sophie. "Is it? Because sometimes I wonder if I'm living in some kind of beautiful dream that I'm going to wake up from. You and Sophie, this house, belonging somewhere for the first time in my life. It feels too good to be real." "It's real," Ethan insisted. "You're not going anywhere. We won't let you." "We?" Clara's voice was soft, uncertain. "Sophie and me. We need you. Both of us." Something shifted in Clara's expression. "Ethan, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to find the right time, but I don't think there is a right time, so I'm just going to say it." Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. "Okay." "These past few months, being part of your lives, being Sophie's aunt, it's been everything I've ever wanted. Family, belonging, purpose. But somewhere along the way, my feelings got complicated." She paused, gathering courage. "I have feelings for you, real feelings. And I know that's probably the worst thing I could say, given that I'm Emma's twin and you're still grieving and Sophie needs me to be her aunt, not some woman with a crush on her father. But I had to tell you because keeping it inside was making me crazy." Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. Clara had feelings for him. Clara had just said out loud what he'd been terrified to admit to himself. "Say something. Clara pleaded when the silence stretched too long. "Even if it's to tell me I've ruined everything." "You haven't ruined anything," Ethan said, his voice rough. "You couldn't ruin anything because I feel it too." Clara's eyes widened. "You do?" "I've been trying to deny it for weeks, telling myself it was wrong, that I was betraying Emma, that I was just confused because you look like her. But Marcus called me out on it, and I've been wrestling with it ever since." Ethan glanced at Sophie, still sleeping peacefully between them. "I have feelings for you, Clara. Not for Emma's twin, not for a replacement or a substitute, for you. For the woman who loves my daughter like her own, who understands grief because she's living it too, who makes me laugh again and makes this house feel like a home instead of a museum to the past." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. "But what about Emma? What about—" "Emma would want us to be happy," Ethan said with sudden certainty. "She'd want Sophie to have a full family, to be loved by as many people as possible. She'd want me to live, not just survive. And I think—" He swallowed hard. "I think she'd be glad it was you, her sister, someone who loves her memory as much as we do." "What do we do?" Clara whispered. "How do we navigate this without messing up what we have?" "Carefully," Ethan said. "Slowly. With Sophie's well-being first, always. We don't rush. We don't make promises we can't keep. We just see where this goes. Together." Clara nodded, wiping her eyes. "Together." They sat there on the couch, Sophie asleep between them, the Christmas movie playing unwatched on the television. Neither of them moved to close the distance between them, to act on the feelings they'd just confessed. This moment was enough. The acknowledgement, the honesty, the understanding that they were in this together. Eventually, Ethan carried Sophie to bed while Clara cleaned up the hot chocolate mugs. When he returned to the living room, she had her coat on, ready to leave. "I'll see you tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow. And the day after that. And the day after that." Clara smiled, that beautiful smile that was hers and Emma's and uniquely her own all at once. "I'm going to hold you to that." After she left, Ethan stood at the window and watched her car pull away, the taillights disappearing into the snowy night. His phone buzzed with a text from her. "Thank you for being brave enough to say it out loud. Sweet dreams." He typed back, "Sweet dreams, Clara." That night, Ethan didn't visit Emma's photo wall. Instead, he sat at his desk and opened his journal to a fresh page. "Emma, I told Clara how I feel tonight. She told me too. We both admitted what's been growing between us for months now. I hope you're not angry. I hope you understand. I loved you with everything I had, and losing you nearly destroyed me. But Clara is teaching me that my heart is bigger than I thought, that I can love her without diminishing what I felt for you, that maybe there's room for both, the past and the future, grief and hope, loss and discovery. Sophie is going to have the family she deserves, and maybe, just maybe, I'm going to learn how to live again. I think you'd want that for all of us. I have to believe you'd want that." He closed the journal and went to check on Sophie one last time before bed. She was sprawled across her mattress, elephant clutched tight, a small smile on her sleeping face. Tomorrow they'd wake up to a world that was different somehow, a world where Ethan and Clara had acknowledged their feelings, where the possibility of a future together existed. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But for tonight, Ethan let himself feel hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope for what might come next. And somewhere, in the spaces between memory and dreams, he imagined Emma smiling. The morning after their confession arrived, wrapped in the kind of crystalline winter silence that made the world feel suspended between moments. Ethan woke before his alarm, his mind immediately returning to the conversation on the couch, to Clara's tear-streaked face as she'd admitted her feelings, to his own voice saying the words he'd been too afraid to acknowledge for weeks. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake or taken the first real step toward healing he'd managed in 3 years. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Clara. "Did last night really happen, or did I dream it?" Ethan smiled despite his nerves and typed back, "It happened. How are you feeling about it?" The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before her response came. Terrified, hopeful, guilty, happy. All of it at once. You? Same. Want to talk about it today, after I drop Sophie at school? Yes. Coffee at our usual place? Our usual place. The phrase caught Ethan off guard with its casual intimacy, the suggestion that they'd built routines and rituals that belonged to them. See you at 9. Sophie bounded into his room 20 minutes later, already dressed in mismatched clothes she'd picked out herself, purple leggings, a green sweater with a sequined unicorn, and the snow boots she'd insisted on wearing despite the relatively mild temperature. Can Aunt Clara come over tonight? She asked while Ethan made breakfast. I want to show her the new book I got from the library about sea turtles. I think Aunt Clara might be busy tonight, Soph. Ethan flipped pancakes, keeping his voice casual. But I'll ask her. She's never too busy for us, Sophie said with the confidence of a child who'd never been let down. She said so. And that was the weight of it, Ethan thought. Sophie had built her world around the certainty of Clara's presence. Whatever happened between him and Clara, they couldn't let it shake that foundation. After dropping Sophie at school, Ethan drove to Riverside grounds with his stomach in knots. Clara was already there, sitting at their corner table. When had it become their table? With 2 coffee cups in front of her. She looked up when he walked in, and Ethan saw his own uncertainty reflected in her face. I got your usual, she said as he sat down. I hope that's okay? I needed something to do with my hands. It's perfect. Ethan wrapped his fingers around the warm cup. So, we should probably talk about what happens next. We should. Clara took a shaky breath. I've been thinking about it all night. About Sophie, about what's best for her, about how we navigate this without putting her in the middle. She's the priority, Ethan said immediately. Whatever this is between us, she comes first, always. Agreed. So maybe we take it slow? Really slow? We don't change anything on the outside while we figure out what this is on the inside. Clara's hands twisted around her cup. I don't want Sophie to feel confused or worried that her aunt is going to disappear if things don't work out romantically. That makes sense, but Clara... Ethan leaned forward. I need you to know something. I've thought about this from every angle. The guilt, the timing, what Emma would think, what it means that you're her twin. And here's what I keep coming back to. I'm falling for you. Not for Emma's replacement. Not for a convenient solution to my loneliness. For you. For Clara Hayes, the woman who teaches 2nd grade and makes terrible puns and loves my daughter like her own. That's who I have feelings for. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I need to know you can separate us. Emma and me. That when you look at me, you see me. I do see you, more and more every day. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, the first deliberately romantic gesture he'd made. You're different from Emma in 100 small ways. The way you organize the spice cabinet drives me crazy because it's not how Emma did it. You fold towels wrong. You sing off key when you cook. You let Sophie stay up past her bedtime because you can't say no to one more story. He smiled. You're not Emma. You're Clara, and I'm falling for Clara. She squeezed his hand, tears spilling over. I'm falling for you too. And it's terrifying because I've never had this before. Never had someone look at me the way you do. Never had a family to protect. I'm terrified of messing it up. So we don't mess it up. We go slow. We're honest with each other. We keep Sophie's well-being first. Ethan paused. And we give ourselves permission to be happy. Both of us have been living in grief for so long. You for a sister you never knew, me for a wife I lost. Maybe it's okay to let ourselves have something good. They talked for 2 hours, working through logistics and fears and possibilities. They agreed not to tell Sophie anything yet, not until they were sure this was real and sustainable. They agreed to keep their relationship exactly as it appeared from the outside, aunt, father, and niece, while privately exploring what else it might become. They agreed that if at any point it became clear this wasn't working, they'd prioritize preserving Clara's relationship with Sophie above all else. I have one more concern, Clara said as they gathered their things to leave. What happens when people find out? When Marcus and Sarah realize we're together? People are going to have opinions about this, about me dating my dead twin's husband. Ethan had thought about this too. Let them have opinions. The people who matter, the people who love us, they'll understand. Everyone else doesn't get a vote in our happiness. Clara smiled, fragile but genuine.
When did you get so wise? Somewhere between losing everything and finding you. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a new rhythm. Outwardly, nothing changed. Clara still came for dinners and bedtime stories. She still picked Sophie up from school twice a week. She still kept her toothbrush in the guest bathroom and her favorite tea in the kitchen cabinet. But privately, in moments stolen after Sophie went to sleep or during phone calls that stretched past midnight, Ethan and Clara were learning each other. They talked about everything. Clara told him about her childhood in Seattle, about feeling different from her adoptive parents in ways she couldn't articulate, about the loneliness that had followed her into adulthood. Ethan talked about meeting Emma in college, about their early years when they'd been too poor to afford furniture, but too happy to care, about the moment Sophie was born and Emma had looked at him with tears streaming down her face and said, "We made a person, an actual person." They talked about Emma, really talked about her, not just the sanitized memories Ethan had been living with, but the real woman with flaws and quirks and bad habits. Clara wanted to know everything, and Ethan found that talking about Emma with her twin was different from talking about her with anyone else. Clara understood in a visceral way what Emma's absence meant because she felt her own version of it. One evening in late December, with Sophie asleep upstairs and Christmas lights twinkling on the tree they'd decorated together the week before, Ethan and Clara sat on the couch with the kind of comfortable closeness they'd gradually allowed themselves. Clara's head rested on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, both of them simply existing in the same space. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said softly. "And you can tell me if it's too much." "Anything." "Do you think Emma would approve? Of us?" Ethan had asked himself the same question 100 times. "I think Emma would want Sophie to have a mother figure who loves her unconditionally. I think she'd want me to be happy instead of drowning in grief. And I think she'd be glad that the person helping us heal is someone who's grieving her too, someone who understands what we lost." "I hope you're right." Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "I hope wherever she is, she knows I would have loved her, that I would have been a good sister if I'd had the chance." "I think she knows." Ethan pressed a kiss to the top of Claire's head, a gesture so natural he didn't second-guess it. "And I think she'd tell you that you're being a good sister now, by loving her daughter, by being here for us." They stayed like that until Clara reluctantly said she should go home. At the door, Ethan caught her hand. "Thank you," he said, "for being patient with this, for understanding why we have to go slow." "Sophie's worth the wait," Clara smiled. "You both are." After she left, Ethan did something he hadn't done in weeks. He stood in front of Emma's photo wall. But this time, instead of asking for permission or forgiveness, he simply said, "I think you'd like what's happening here, Em. I think you'd be happy for us. And I'm going to choose to believe that, because the alternative is living the rest of my life feeling guilty for finding joy again. Sophie deserves better than that. Clara deserves better. And maybe I do too." Christmas morning arrived in a flurry of wrapping paper and squeals of delight as Sophie tore through her presents. Clara had spent the night in the guest room, their first trial of her staying over, framed as a sleepover for Sophie's benefit. And the three of them made pancakes together in their pajamas while Christmas music played on the radio. "This is the best Christmas ever," Sophie announced, maple syrup on her chin, surrounded by new books and art supplies, and a bicycle that would have to wait for spring. "Because we're all together." Ethan and Clara exchanged glances over her head. They hadn't exchanged gifts with each other, not wanting to make anything feel too significant yet, but Clara had slipped an envelope under the tree with Ethan's name on it. Inside was a photo she'd had restored and framed. One of the baby pictures from the box her adoptive mother had left her, showing both twins side by side in their hospital bassinets, taken in the brief window before they'd been separated. "I wanted you to have this," Clara had said when he'd opened it privately in the kitchen while Sophie played with her new toys. "So you can see Emma at the very beginning, and me, both of us together, even if it was only for a few days." Ethan had pulled her into a hug, overcome by the gesture. "It's perfect. Thank you." Now, watching Sophie play while Clara cleaned up breakfast dishes, humming off-key to Jingle Bell Rock, Ethan felt something settle in his chest. This was what moving forward looked like. Not forgetting Emma, not replacing her, but making space for new love alongside the old. The new year arrived with unexpected news. Claire came over on January 3rd with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read, somewhere between excited and terrified. I heard back from the adoption agency, she said once Sophie was occupied with a puzzle in the living room. They found more records about our mother, about why we were separated.
They sat at the kitchen table while Clara pulled documents from her bag. Our mother, Patricia, she was young, only 19, and she was alone. No partner, no family support system except her mother, who was already elderly and in poor health. When she went into labor, there were complications. She hemorrhaged after delivering us. They couldn't save her. Ethan reached for Clara's hand. I'm sorry. The social worker's notes say that our grandmother, Constance, was at the hospital. She wanted to take both of us, but the social worker deemed her too old and too sick to care for twin infants. So they made a decision. Constance could take one baby, Emma, if she agreed to let the other be adopted by a younger, healthier family. Clara's voice shook. Our grandmother chose Emma because she was born first, because in those 5 minutes, Emma had already been named, already been claimed, and I was baby B, still waiting for someone to want me. Clara, no, let me finish. I need to say this. Clara wiped her eyes. For 33 years, I thought there was something wrong with me, something that made me unlovable, unwantable. I built my entire identity around being the child who was given away. And now I find out it wasn't about me at all. It was about impossible choices and limited resources and a social worker who thought she knew what was best. Your grandmother made an impossible choice, Ethan said gently. Keep one baby she couldn't really care for or lose both. She chose to save what she could. I know, intellectually I know that, but emotionally? Clara pressed a hand to her chest. There's this little girl inside me who still wants to know why I wasn't enough, why Emma got to be kept and I got to be given away. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her puzzle apparently forgotten. Aunt Clara, why are you crying? Clara quickly wiped her eyes and pasted on a smile. Just talking about some grown-up stuff, sweetheart. I'm okay. But Sophie wasn't fooled. She climbed into Clara's lap with the easy affection they'd built over months together. Daddy says it's okay to cry. That crying means we're brave enough to feel our feelings. Clara laughed through her tears and hugged Sophie tight. Your daddy's very smart. I know. Sophie patted Clara's cheek. And you're very loved. Me and Daddy love you so much. So you don't have to be sad about being given away because we chose you and we're keeping you forever. The simple declaration from a 6-year-old broke something open in Clara. She held Sophie and cried properly while Ethan watched with his own vision blurring. Sometimes children saw the truth more clearly than adults ever could. That night, after Sophie was asleep and Clara had composed herself, she and Ethan talked about what the new information meant. About how understanding the past didn't erase its pain but maybe made it more bearable. About how both twins had been loved. Emma, by the grandmother who'd sacrificed everything to keep her, Clara by the adoptive parents who'd chosen her despite the separation being forced. I spent my whole life searching for what was missing, Clara said, and I thought finding my biological family would fill that hole. But the missing piece wasn't them. It was this. She gestured between them toward the stairs where Sophie slept. Belonging, being chosen, being loved, not despite my history, but including it. You are loved, Ethan said, taking her hands in his. By Sophie. By me. We're not filling the hole Emma left. We're creating something new. Something that honors her memory while still being ours. I'm ready, Clara said suddenly. I'm ready to stop hiding what we are. I'm ready to tell Sophie, to tell people, to stop pretending this is just friendship or family obligation. I love you, Ethan, and I love Sophie. And I want to be part of this family in every way, not just as the aunt who visits. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. Are you sure? Once we tell Sophie, we can't take it back. I'm sure. Are you? Ethan thought about Emma, about the 3 years he'd spent frozen in grief, about Marcus telling him that Emma would want him to be happy, about Sophie asking for her aunt every single day, about Clara crying in his kitchen over a separation that had shaped her entire life. I'm sure, he said. I love you too. Not instead of Emma. alongside her memory. Is that okay? It's more than okay. Clara smiled through fresh tears. It's perfect. They decided to tell Sophie together the following weekend. Ethan had consulted with a child therapist who specialized in grief and blended families, who'd assured him that children were remarkably resilient if given honesty and consistency. Sophie already loved Clara, already wanted her around constantly. The romantic relationship between the adults would simply be naming what Sophie already felt, that Clara was family in the deepest sense. Saturday morning, they made pancakes again. It had become their ritual. While they ate, Ethan cleared his throat and said, "Soph, Aunt Clara and I want to talk to you about something important." Sophie looked up, syrup on her chin as usual, eyes bright with curiosity. "Okay?" "You know how much Aunt Clara means to us, right?" Ethan continued. "How much we love having her here." "She's family," Sophie said, as if this were obvious. "She's Mommy's sister, and my aunt, and she loves us." "That's right. She is all those things. And Aunt Claire and I have realized that we have special feelings for each other, the kind of feelings that grown-ups have when they care about each other in a romantic way." Sophie's brow furrowed as she processed this. "Like in the princess movies? When the prince and princess fall in love?" "Sort of like that," Claire said gently. "Except there's no prince or princess. Just your dad and me figuring out that we want to be together. But Sophie, nothing changes about how much I love you or how much I loved your mom. You'll always be my niece. I'll always be your Aunt Clara first." "But you want to be Daddy's girlfriend too?" Sophie asked. "Yes," Clara said simply, "if that's okay with you." Sophie thought about this while she chewed her pancake. Ethan's heart was racing, terrified of what she might say, but trying to trust that they'd built enough foundation for this. Finally, Sophie swallowed and said, "Will you still come over for dinners and bedtimes?" "Every single day if you want me to," Clara promised. "Will you still take me to the park on Saturdays?" "Absolutely." "Will you still read me the moon book even though you know it by heart now?" "Always." Sophie nodded, satisfied. "Then it's okay, because you're not leaving. You're just staying in a different way." She paused, then added with heartbreaking wisdom, "Mommy would want us to be happy. She always wanted people to be happy. You make Daddy happy, and you make me happy, so I think Mommy would say it's good." Clara started crying again. Happy tears this time. She pulled Sophie into a hug while Ethan blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by his daughter's capacity for love and acceptance. "You're the smartest, kindest girl I've ever known," Clara whispered into Sophie's hair. "Your mom did such a good job with you." "Daddy did a good job too," Sophie pointed out. "And now you can help. Because being a parent is hard and Daddy gets tired sometimes and you can share the work." Ethan laughed, slightly watery. "You've got it all figured out, don't you, Soph?" "I'm 6 now. I know lots of things." In the weeks and months that followed, their family took its final shape. Clara moved in slowly, first leaving more clothes in the guest room, then bringing some of her books, then officially giving up her apartment lease and claiming the guest room as her own space. She and Ethan were careful to maintain appropriate boundaries with Sophie present, but Sophie wasn't fooled. She saw the way they looked at each other, the way they moved around each other in the kitchen, the way they held hands when they thought she wasn't watching. One evening in early spring, almost a year after that first disastrous blind date at Marchetti's, Ethan found Sophie at Emma's photo wall, studying the pictures with unusual intensity. "Hey, Soph, what are you looking at?" "I'm trying to see the differences," she said, "between Mommy and Aunt Clara, because I want to remember Mommy as Mommy, not mix them up." Ethan knelt beside her. "What differences do you see?" "Well, Aunt Clara smiles bigger, and she wears her hair different, and in these pictures Mommy looks, I don't know, softer, but Aunt Clara is strong. Like she's been through hard things and came out okay." Sophie touched one of the photos. "I love them both. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay, sweetheart. Loving Aunt Clara doesn't take away from how much you loved Mommy. Love doesn't work like that. It grows. It expands. There's always room for more." "Like how we added more family and didn't lose anyone, we just got bigger?" "Exactly like that." Sophie nodded, satisfied with this explanation. Then, in the way of children, she moved on to her next thought. "Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Aunt Clara makes it better than you do. Don't be mad." Ethan laughed. "I'm not mad. She does make it better. That night, with Sophie in bed and Clara curled against him on the couch, Ethan thought about the journey they'd taken. From that moment in Marchetti's when he'd seen Emma's face on a stranger, to now, when Clara was simply Clara, the woman he loved, the woman who'd brought their family back to life. "What are you thinking about?" Clara asked, her fingers tracing patterns on his arm. "How far we've come. How impossible this all seemed a year ago. Do you ever regret it? Letting me into your life, into Sophie's life?" "Never. Not once." Ethan turned to look at her, these eyes he'd know anywhere, this face that had terrified him and now brought only joy. "You gave us back our future, gave Sophie a mother figure who loves her, gave me a partner who understands grief and healing and why we need both. You gave me a family," Clara said simply. "After a lifetime of searching, you gave me exactly what I needed." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the house quiet around them, Sophie sleeping peacefully upstairs, Emma's photos watching over them from the hallway. It all felt right in a way Ethan hadn't thought possible after losing Emma. "I have something for you," Clara said, sitting up and reaching for her bag. She pulled out a small velvet box, and Ethan's breath caught. "Clara, it's not what you think. Well, it is, but not yet. Not until you're ready." She opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring. "This was in the things my adoptive mother left me. She wore it her whole life. I want you to have it, not as an engagement ring, but as a promise that I'm here, that I'm staying, that whenever you're ready to make this official, I will be too." Ethan took the box with trembling hands. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. We both deserve happiness. We both deserve love. And we both deserve to honor Emma while still building our future." Clara smiled. "She brought us together, in a way. Her twin sister finding her family. That's kind of beautiful, don't you think?" "It's more than beautiful. It's a gift." Ethan set the box carefully on the coffee table and pulled Clara into his arms. "Thank you for being patient, for loving Sophie, for loving me, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for seeing me," Clara whispered, "for looking past Emma's face and finding mine." They kissed then, gentle and sweet, a promise of all the tomorrows they'd build together. When they finally pulled apart, Clara rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." Upstairs, Sophie slept, dreaming whatever 6-year-olds dream about. In the hallway, Emma's photos kept their silent vigil, a reminder of what had been. And in the living room, Ethan and Clara held each other, proof that life continued, that hearts healed, that love found ways to grow in the spaces grief created. 2 years later, on a sunny Saturday in June, Ethan and Clara stood in the backyard of their house. It was our house now, not just his, surrounded by friends and family. Sophie stood between them, in a purple dress she'd picked out herself, holding a basket of flower petals, practically vibrating with excitement. Marcus officiated, because of course he did. "We're gathered here today," and he began, "to celebrate a love story that nobody could have predicted. A love that grew from loss, that honored the past while embracing the future, that proved family is about who shows up and stays." Ethan looked at Clara. His Clara, not Emma's twin, not a replacement, just Clara, and felt his heart expand with something that felt like joy and gratitude and peace all mixed together. "I promise to love you for exactly who you are," he said when it was his turn. "To never compare you to anyone else. To be your partner in raising Sophie and in building our life. To honor Emma's memory while making new memories with you. To choose you every single day." Clara's vows were equally simple and profound. "I promise to love your daughter as my own. To be the family we both searched for our whole lives. To remind you that grief and love can coexist. To be your partner, your friend, your home. To show up and stay every single day." When Marcus pronounced them married, Sophie threw her flower petals in the air with abandon, shrieking with joy. The guests laughed and applauded, and Ethan kissed his wife, his new wife, his Clara, while somewhere in the space between memory and hope, he imagined Emma smiling. That evening, after the guests had left and Sophie was asleep in her room, Ethan and Clara stood at Emma's photo wall one final time. But it wasn't just Emma's wall anymore. They'd added pictures of Clara, too, of her first meeting with Sophie, of holidays they'd celebrated together, of the ordinary moments that had built their family. "We should take this down," Clara said softly. "Make space for new pictures, for our life together." "No," Ethan said. "We keep it. Because Emma is part of our story. She always will be. She gave me Sophie, and in a way she gave me you too." Clara leaned into his side. "Our daughter is lucky to have such an incredible heritage. Two mothers who loved her in different ways. A father who never stopped fighting for her happiness." "Our daughter," Ethan repeated, testing the words. Clara had officially adopted Sophie 3 months earlier, making their family complete on paper as well as in their hearts. They stood there together, these two people who'd found each other through impossible circumstances, who'd built love on the foundation of loss, who'd learned that hearts were more resilient than anyone gave them credit for. In her room, Sophie slept with her elephant, dreaming of mothers and aunts and the blurry line between them, dreaming of a family that had broken and healed and expanded, dreaming of love that was big enough to hold everyone, the living and the dead, the past and the present, the grief and the joy. And in the quiet of the night, in this house full of love and memory and possibility, 3 hearts beat in rhythm. A family created not by blood alone, but by choice, by presence, by showing up and staying. Emma's legacy lived on, not in grief, but in the love that continued to grow from the seeds she'd planted. In the daughter who carried her smile. In the sister who loved that daughter as her own. In the man who'd learned that loving again wasn't betrayal, but the highest form of honoring what he'd lost. Love didn't run out. It expanded. It transformed. It healed. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to let it, love brought impossible gifts wrapped in familiar faces, teaching you that the heart's capacity was infinite, that family was about who stayed, and that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to live again, fully and completely, with all the broken pieces rearranged into something new and beautiful and whole. This was their story. Emma's, Clara's, Ethan's, and Sophie's. A story of loss and discovery, of grief and healing, of impossible coincidences and chosen family. A story that proved the hardest truth of all, that love, real love, never truly ends. It simply changes form, finding new ways to express itself, new hearts to fill, new families to create. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.